Our guest today is Risa Groux. Risa is a functional nutritionist and certified autoimmune coach, and she's been in the health coaching industry forever. This episode is for the lab values lovers and those who love to geek out on data. Please be sure to understand the regional regulations in your area with respect to health coaching scope of practice. In many regions, health coaches are not qualified to work with lab tests directly. Risa has seen it all and has a lot of veteran coach wisdom to share. So let's learn now from a seasoned pro. Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio. All right, Risa Groux, how are you?
I'm so great. I'm so happy to be here.
We love talking to fellow sort of nutrition geeks, right? Folks that love to work in this space. So thanks for joining us. We try to start every episode with you telling your story rather than us telling your story. So would you mind filling our audience in on kind of who you are, but most importantly, kind of your origin story, how you got to here? Where did you start?
Sure. So I am a functional nutritionist. I'm also a certified autoimmune coach. And I've always been interested in nutrition. It's just always been a passion of mine. I grew up in a house where my mother was always on a diet. She was trying to lose those 5 or 10 pounds. And, there were foods that were fattening and bad and good. And I thought, what's the story here? Why are some foods bad and some foods are good? And this whole relationship with food, my grandmother was doing the same thing. It was just like, why are some, like all the bad foods taste pretty good to me? Why are they bad? Right. And so I grew up with this passion for nutrition. I ended up going into a very different career, sports marketing. But I was always reading any nutrition books I could. And I raised my kids. And once they were old enough and they didn't need me as much, I went back to school and I became a certified clinical nutritionist. And at that time, I got pregnant with my first daughter originally when I first got married, and no problems conceiving. That was not an issue. And then we were trying for number 2. I just couldn't get pregnant. And eventually I did get pregnant, but I would lose the baby. I lost 2 babies. And I was super frustrated. Why is this that I'm having no problem getting pregnant the first time, but I'm having trouble conceiving the second time? So I went to see a fertility specialist. He did some labs and he said, you've got a hypothyroid. And he handed me a script. And it was a script for Synthroid. And I thought, why is it that I'm having the synthetic medication, right? It's a synthetic hormone to replace something that my body's actually born to produce. But I said to him, how long do I take it? He said, every day. And I said, no, for how long? And he said, forever. And I thought, this is weird. So it started my journey. And then I eventually did natural things and acupuncture and changed my diet a bit. And I got pregnant with my second, had a very healthy pregnancy. And I have 2 fabulous kids. But after that, shortly thereafter, I went to a naturopath doctor who diagnosed me with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease that attacks your thyroid. So I thought, why is my thyroid such an underachiever? And I went down that rabbit hole, and it was actually concurrent to the time I was going to school. And so it really sort of expedited my education. And I just was on a hunt to find out root causes. Why is it that we get autoimmune disease? So I put together a whole list of root causes, which I can't find on the planet. So I put it in my book, Food Frame. And I work with that with people that I work with all the time. And we find autoimmune, or they come in with autoimmune, and we try and quell that cascade of inflammation. So, and then I opened up my practice and I thought, oh, everybody should be eating like this. And so I did a set sort of eating lifestyle for everybody. And some people would come in and be thriving. And then other people would come in and they'd be like, it's not working. I'm feeling bloated or whatever. And I realized that's how I developed my methodology called Food Frame, that I realized everybody should be eating for their actual current health status and not so much a one size fits all, right? We're in the day where the TV tells us what kind of movies we like and series, right? our Spotify tells us what kind of music we like. We should be eating according to what our health status is. And it's different for everybody. Onions would be great for some, and onions would be horrible for others, right? So that's how I created that methodology. And I'm grateful to have a thriving practice and a book and a course. And I've been able to have a really amazing impact on a lot of people, which is, I think, the coolest thing in the world, to watch people heal.
Amazing. Love that. That origin story, it rings familiar to both of us, and also probably a lot of our listeners. I think it's really common to have had a frustrating health experience, like a rejection of a diagnosis, in a manner of speaking. When I got my pre-diabetes diagnosis, I said, no, right. not me. That's not me. It doesn't make sense. Like, right. Why? So, to your point, like, wait, why do I have to take a synthetic hormone? Why did this thing stop working? Like, why aren't we talking about that?
Why aren't we asking why?
Honestly.
Right.
So that rings really familiar to a lot of people. And then there's this anger, this frustration, but also, and then leveraging that to the seeking to understand and seeking to want to share. I think that almost every health coach listening can relate to that. So you have a lot of great stuff that's come about in this sort of second career of yours. Love to hear that too, because again, I think that's a lot of folks that's Laura and I as well, second careers for both of us. So you have a thriving private practice. So you're working with clients one-on-one, or do you work mostly in groups?
No, I only do one-on-one, and I work 4 days a week. I see about 40 to 50 patients a week. Yeah. Okay. It's pretty busy, but it's great.
Yeah. Are these folks predominantly Hashimoto's thyroid type clients, or is it all spectrum of autoimmunity?
It's all across the board. I'm working with somebody right now with cancer. I've got rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia. So I do have a lot of autoimmune. I do have a lot of diabetes, pre-diabetes. I do very extensive blood work. So if they don't know when they walk in not knowing they have a health status, then they soon find out. Not everybody does, but a lot of people. Blood sugar dysregulation is extraordinarily common. Yeah. You found that out. And I look very deep. I look at insulin. So I'm looking at C-peptide and fasting insulin. I'm looking at hemoglobin A1C and fasting glucose. So most doctors will just look at fasting glucose and possibly hemoglobin A1C to see if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic or in optimal range. But I go a little bit deeper. I also do all 9 markers of the thyroid. So I'm looking to see if there's any antibodies. I test for 2 antibodies. I also look at T3 uptake to see if hormones are affecting the thyroid. And I also look at reverse T3, which tells us if cortisol, our stress hormone, could be some systemic inflammation as well, is reversing that T3. And then I look very deeply into kidney and liver and gallbladder. And I look at the breakdown of white blood cells. I order vitamin D. I'm always looking to see if there a viral pattern, is there a bacterial pattern? I'm always looking at the root causes. So, and then I also order an extensive stool test for everybody I work with that has 84 pathogens to detect if there's candida or any kind of, fungus or pathogens, parasitic pathogens, parasites, worms, potential autoimmune triggers, which we see a lot. I see that with a lot of colitis and Crohn's and rheumatoid arthritis patients. Once we kill that bacteria, that pathogen, we're really able to see a lot of reverse of symptoms. So that's really fun. And then I get a general information on how many pancreatic enzyme production, how is your production? How are you doing with fat malabsorption, steatocrit? I'm looking at anti-gliadin, IgA to anti-gliadin, so to see how gluten sensitive you are. If some of these show up, I always test for zonulin as well for leaky gut. But if those things show up, then I usually I always do follow-up tests to see if there's any how gluten sensitive and cross-reactivity and things like that.
Wow. So I'm going to ask a loaded question, but bear with me. There's a reason why I'm asking. So you said you're a certified clinical nutritionist and an autoimmune coach. How is that different? Because you're ordering a lot of labs. Are you a licensed nutritionist in your state kind of thing? And that allows you to be able to order this kind of stuff? How would you describe the difference between, because this comes up for health coaches, is like, what is health coaching? Are you a dietitian? Are you a nutritionist? What am I allowed to do? So a lot of what you're talking about is out of scope for a typical health coach. So would you mind contrasting a little bit about kind of what you have in terms of your certification or licensure that allows you to do that? Or are you working with someone that helps you order those and then you're moving forward? Can you help paint a picture so that people can understand?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, actually. And I'm glad that you asked it, because I sort of skimmed over that in my talking about my background. But I did go to school to get a clinical nutritional certification. So I'm a certified clinical nutritionist. Then once I became a nutritionist, you really don't have a license to be a nutritionist. I mean, it's crazy. You need a license to paint houses and walk dogs, but not really nutrition. So I became a clinical nutritionist, and then I was opened up to functional medicine and functional nutrition. So I started taking lots and lots of classes through some of the nutraceutical companies. I did Apex and Designs for Health. Both of those are really top nutraceutical companies that I use product from. And they offer a lot of classes that you have to pay for, but they are just amazing. And that's where I did a lot of my real learning. And I dove into functional medicine pretty deeply. So technically, I am a functional nutritionist. You can go to school to become a functional nutritionist. I never did that because it really wasn't a thing when I was doing this. And so now I would go just for the piece of paper, but I'm pretty much self-certified, right? So if I had to do it all over again, I would absolutely go to the Institute of Functional Medicine and become a functional nutritionist. But I've sort of went in through the back door, and I am a functional nutritionist just because I have that learning.
Based on your background and kind of
right. And the major difference between, because you're right, the scope of registered dietitians are very different than health coaches and very different than nutritionists and clinical nutritionists and then functional nutritionists. So I've been able to get labs ordered through Principal Labs, and Principal Labs orders directly through LabCorp. So I order whatever I want on that lab, and I have a set order that I do for everybody I work with. And then I do any follow-up tests either there, or you can use Direct Labs as well. That's another resource to use. And then I use the stool test is with Diagnostic Solutions. They don't give that to everybody, so you have to apply for that. And I believe same thing with Principal. It's been so long since I applied, so I don't know what the rules are now. But there are some labs that will not give it to nutritionists that are not certified in, maybe certified functional nutritionists. I'm not entirely sure, but pretty much you can get around a lot of those labs. And Rupa Health is another company. It's basically like a distributor of all labs. So if you can get an account with Rupa, then you have access to almost all the labs. The Dutch test seems to be the most evasive for people like me. Mm-hmm. But generally, I can get around that, and I order hormones all day long. I order pretty much anything I need between blood and stool tests. So I'm pretty covered.
Okay. So I do think it's worth just reiterating that for most health coaches, all of this is out of scope of practice. Just so anybody listening is thinking of ordering these tests, just really be careful about that. But I'm curious to know how you help your clients, or if at all, how and if you help your clients connect these objective health markers that they're getting from all these tests to their subjective, like symptomatology. Like, do you make that connection with your clients? And because from my perspective, and I'd love to know what you think about this too, the client has their lived experience in their body. And we get all these test results that tell us, well, here's where things are out of balance. And this is what that feels like. And this is how that's manifesting in your daily life. And this is why this feels like that. Like, do you take the time to work with your clients on their subjective experience of health as well? Or do you really double down on the objective data?
That's a good question. Probably a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. What I typically do, I spend a lot of time with people. I'll spend an hour on their initial. So I go through all their health history. I ask a lot of questions. How many antibiotics did you have? What kind of medications do you take? What supplements? All that stuff. So I get a lot of data. And that data I have them fill out a metabolic assessment form, which is 3 pages that gives me information. So almost by the end of that first appointment, I have an idea what's going. I can kind of feel like this is a cortisol issue, or this could be a low thyroid or some hormones or blood sugar dysregulation. I've been doing this so long, I can tell from their symptoms, and I can tell from their metabolic assessment form, and just my meeting with them, I can tell. Sometimes I can even tell by just looking at them if they're, what they are, but because I've been doing it for so long. But what happens is when they come in for their follow-up for their blood test results, I spend an hour with them and I go through every major marker that I believe. I go through their liver and their kidney and their gallbladder, and I go through blood sugar, and I break down that thyroid for them. I mean, I really break it down because I think everybody needs to know what your thyroid function is. And allopathic conventional medicine does not do that. So I feel that it is their right to know. I wish somebody had done that for me. So I explain that to them. And usually I'll get a lot of comments like, oh, that completely makes sense, because I'll say, well, symptoms of low T3 are anxiety, fatigue, outside of the eyebrows go, the hair is thinning, the nails are weak, your cold extremities, constipation, things like that. And they go, oh yeah, that's me. So yeah, there's a method to this madness that you've come in with, and you've complained that I eat well, I exercise, I do everything right, but I still can't lose weight. Well, I talk to them about the 5 reasons why we cannot lose weight. And typically they're at least one of the 5, right? So we go through those things, and so I try to make it relatable to them, because they go to allopathic conventional medicine and they're talking at them, or they'll say, yeah, it's fine. They'll go through your blood work. Here's your blood work. It's good. And you go, well, what's somebody actually told me a story yesterday. This is a new patient that came in yesterday, that their friend, unfortunately, just died of a stroke like a couple of weeks ago. And the doctor they had gone to the doctor. I guess they weren't feeling well. They did a blood draw, and the doctor called, not knowing that he had passed, and called and said, yeah, I just want to let you know your blood work looks great. So that's what we're getting from conventional medicine.
So, like, little anecdote, I was at the gym. I coach at a gym down the street, and I was talking to one of the members there about his daughter who recently joined. She just finished like the little foundations, and so she joined, and he was telling me her story about literally just last year. She all of a sudden started she would have these constant seizures, like hundreds of seizures a day. But it was not epileptic seizures. They ruled out, it was something else. I forget the term that they use for basically seizures that aren't related to epilepsy. They went to see neurologists. They saw every single doctor you could have possibly imagine that might have some sort of influence over why she's having these seizures. And every test they ran came back normal. They literally said nothing's wrong with her. And he's like, hello, she can't walk more than 20 feet before she falls over. She is not normal. And it wasn't until a friend of ours, she's a PT, physical therapist, that said, you know what, go see this person who's a nutritionist of some kind, who does a lot of these functional labs. They ran a food sensitivity test and a couple of other things, put her on a specific diet. And they did some other things. It wasn't just diet. She is now able to attend CrossFit classes, and she's able to go to school.
Yeah.
It's astounding to me. He is completely baffled at the amount of money and time they spent with board certified experts that told her she was normal. They had the gall to look at her and her parents in the face and tell her nothing's wrong.
Right.
Meanwhile, she couldn't go to school. Mom couldn't have a job because she would seizure out of nowhere.
Yeah, she can't function.
And then meanwhile, we're talking about how all of this stuff might be out of scope for people that are well-meaning. And it is. And here, so all this whole lead up, why I'm kind of telling this story, I would imagine when you first started your practice, you didn't necessarily have the knowledge and the skill set and the education to be able to do all this. This is stuff you built over time.
Absolutely.
So would you mind, again, I want to kind of take a step back and kind of help our listeners go along this journey with you on how you evolved your knowledge, what courses you took and programs you took, and why, to help you get to sort of, and bear in mind, I know this was a while ago. Some of these programs might not be around as they are today. They may be different, but could you share that journey with us on kind of what led you to the point where you are capable now and knowledgeable enough, and what resources you leverage to be able to deliver this for people.
Absolutely. I just want to acknowledge that story because it is unbelievably frustrating. And we've all had those experiences. And the statistic is that the average person goes to 6 healthcare practitioners before they're diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm working with somebody right now, just a few months now, who came to see me after he had a heart attack. And, he's on myriads of medication, one of which is a statin. So, the marketing is that cholesterol causes, a heart attack, but actually, long-term statin. So anyway, I said to him, you had this heart attack, they put stents in, you survived, that's great. So, you're on statins 25 years now. What did the doctor say? He said, he just switched me to a different statin. And I'm thinking, your cholesterol's at 139. It's not the devil. We need it. It's a messenger system. You're too low and you've blocked all your CoQ10. But what about your inflammation markers? Has anybody looked at your inflammation markers, right? I mean, I could tell you a million stories. I have the same story with Freddie Couples, the professional golfer, who has chronic back pain for years. He was famous for his back pain. He's been let off of golf courses, on stretchers. And when he came into my office, he wanted to lose 20 pounds for the Masters. I said to him, what about this inflammation? What about, the back pain? So I tested him and he had all these markers for inflammation, and he lives on golf courses and works on golf courses. He's breathing in toxins all day and all night, perpetually. And so he was really just very toxic, and it caused all this inflammation. Anyway, he no longer has back pain. But the answer to your question is, I didn't really learn what I know now in school.
Yeah.
So unfortunately. And I really learned it through the training that I did. I had a lot of mentoring through some of the nutraceutical companies that I work with. And I had a couple doctors that I ran labs with. I went to every lunch meeting that I could get my hands on at the beginning. Nutraceutical companies really offer a lot of education. And so you learn about supplementation, you learn about blood chemistry. I took a mastering blood chemistry course a few times, and then I took mastering thyroid a couple times as well. So, and I just had mentors that I worked with every single day, and I would order labs. And still to this day, sometimes if I get a tricky lab that I'm not sure what to do with that, I'll call one of the doctors and we'll go through it together. And I'm always learning. I mean, I know a ton now, obviously, but you're always learning. You're always learning. There's always a new case that I haven't had that one before. So, and I learn, and that's how you go. So I've been very fortunate. I've also had a lot of great support. Dr. Axe has been very kind to me, and JJ Virgin and Dr. Gundry, he endorsed my book as well. So I've had some pretty good support that way. I've reached out to a lot of people, and it's just worked for me. And I'm hungry for that knowledge. I really want to know. I want to know, why does cholesterol go up? Why do we have heart attacks when we have low cholesterol? I want to know, why do we not lose weight? Why do you do everything possible and you cannot lose weight? Why is that? Right? So now I know. I mean, I spend a lifetime not knowing. So it's, and I read a lot. I don't read as much now as I used to, but webinars and things like that, anything that and there's so much information out there now than when I started, there wasn't, but now there's so much information. So I would say to somebody who's starting out, find where your passion is. If you want to pick a niche, if you want to do autoimmune, you want to do endocrine system, or you want to do weight loss, or whatever it is that you're interested in, or if you're interested in what I'm doing and that kind of a thing, I would pursue functional nutrition and get certified and go down that road. They'll give you a ton of support. They go through labs, what labs to order and things like that. So those are the things that I would recommend, and reach out to mentors who, or potential mentors who can help.
Yeah, I like that advice. I think the summary of it is hone in on a specialty. I would say, I think it's really important to at least start that way, specialize in one thing, find all the thought leaders, all the courses, all the information you can, and really just learn and learn and learn, be open to learning that one thing and become the specialist in that thing. Hi, it's Erin Power here, co-host of Health Coach Radio. Fitness has always been a part of my life. I used to train clients one-on-one, and I still teach group exercise classes to this day. Fitness is how I got started on my journey to health coaching. Working as a fitness trainer, I always wanted to go deeper than the reps and help my clients incorporate fitness and movement into every aspect of their lives. I instinctively knew that reaching fitness goals depends on pulling the focus from performance and putting it on holistic, sustainable change. And that's exactly what the Primal Fitness Coach certification shows coaches how to do. Your clients deserve to move better, feel better, be pain-free, enjoy exercise, and love their bodies. The Primal Fitness Coach certification teaches you how to train people to be fit for life, to avoid injuries, increase mobility, develop lean muscle mass, protect joints, and optimize metabolic health. This well-rounded functional fitness certification covers best practices for daily movement, strength training and conditioning, HIIT exercises, sprinting, and more. It also includes practical hands-on coaching training and business development lessons to help you launch and grow a profitable fitness coaching business. Visit primalhealthcoach.com to learn more about the Primal Fitness Coach certification. Something that you said earlier that I jotted down a note as you said it, and it's sort of like on my wish list. I'm wondering if you see anything like this in your practice, and maybe we can sort of riff on it. This idea that you said everyone should know what their thyroid is doing. And I thought, that's a great point. Even before you're symptomatic, you should be able to go in and say, I would like to just benchmark where my 9 thyroid markers are at.
Right.
But that would never happen. I'm thinking about this from the perspective of I went to my sports medicine doctor, the guy I go to when I hurt myself. Whenever I hurt myself, I have this guy that I go to and I say, oh, I hurt myself. Can we fix this injury? So the last time I fixed an injury, I said, you know what? I'm tired of getting injured. Can I just come here once a month and you run like a diagnostic test so we can stay ahead of these injuries? I just really don't want to be sidelined. And it was like, yeah, we don't really do that. Like you kind of have to have something to go to the doctor. It's like, what if I wanted to be preventative? Do you know what I mean? Like, so would you do that? Do you do that with clientele? Like if a person who's generally healthy, normal, said, I want to know where I'm at. I want to run these from a preventative standpoint, just to get the benchmarking. Do you do that?
You just highlighted the paradigm of conventional medicine, right? We are very reactive. We're not preventative. So there's a pill for an ill. We go in and the doctors do not treat you unless there's disease. Yeah. So when I look at a thyroid lab and I say, okay, you're a tenth of a point away from being technically out of lab range on TSH, but you're at the bottom of the barrel on T3 and you've got antibodies. So technically you're Hashimoto's, but they will not treat you until you're out of lab range, right? So they don't treat you until you're already in a disease state. In functional nutrition or functional medicine, there's 4 pillars that we work with, and one of them is prevention. We want to prevent disease, right? Where allopathic medicine is already treating you when you get into disease. It can't do anything for prevention. The second thing is we look at root causes. Why is it? Do I have chronic headaches? Why am I bloating? Why can't I lose weight? Why can't I sleep at night? And the third thing is we look at the body as one whole interconnective unit. So everything has to do with each other. And the fourth thing we look at is data, right? I'm not really good at playing darts with the lights off and I cannot see the target. I don't know if you guys are better at that than me, but I do a lot of guessing, right? I kind of think we're over here, but I like to get the data, have the lights on, see where my target is. So those are the 4 pillars of what I do in my office. And I work at foundational issues of systemic inflammation and gut health. Those are the root causes of either optimizing health or hindering health. But it's really important to know the mechanics of your thyroid. I think everybody is entitled to that information.
Yeah.
You know, if you come to see me and I do these labs for you, you've got a baseline. So that you know when you get a different medication, well, is this working or is this not working? Well, we're just not going to base it on the TSH. We're going to look at the whole panel, right?
Yeah. I think of it from the perspective of like, it's my right to know my numbers. And another anecdote, my neighbor decided she was going to pay out of pocket for annual mammograms. I live in Canada, so we have a different healthcare situation. But anyway, she's paying out of pocket for annual mammograms because of the universal healthcare. You know, it's like once every, I don't even know what the rules are, but it's really not a very good interval to catch things. Let's just leave it at that. So she went and had a mammogram and an ultrasound. They found cancer.
Wow.
That would not have turned up it wouldn't have turned up in the mammogram it was on the ultrasound where they found it. She had to pay extra for the ultrasound. It would not have turned up at a breast self-exam. She wouldn't have found it. She's putting this on her agenda once a year to get it checked asymptomatically, and they caught it. If we waited for a symptom to show up, like a lump in a breast exam, now it's years down the line, right? So it's like, I as an asymptomatic person, I think we should have the right to go and see where we're at.
Absolutely. I have a similar story that I worked with somebody, it was a few years ago, and he was 35 and married 2 young little kids, and he came and he wanted to lose a few pounds. And I did a stool test like I do with everybody, and I found a lot of occult blood, right? So this is microscopic blood in his species. And so I said, you need to go get this checked out, have a colonoscopy as soon as possible. Most likely it's hemorrhoids. That's usually what the case is. And so he went in, he came back into my office the next week. I got in, thank you so much. My dad had colon cancer and died of colon cancer. And so he went in and he found 4 polyps. And he said, oh, they took him out, but the biopsying, the doctor didn't think it was anything. The next week he came back in and said, it's cancer. Mm-hmm. So he was fortunate enough that we got it at the very beginning. So he's fine. And, he's been fine ever since, but he was 35. They wouldn't have given him a colonoscopy until he's 50. So he wouldn't have known until he was majorly symptomatic, and it was probably stage 4, and then good luck, right? Yeah. So to your point, prevention is huge. And unfortunately, we do have to take our dollars out of our pocket because our health insurance are not really aimed at helping us prevent, right? They're just trying to help us on the back end. They say no to everything for prevention. And then they, will pick and choose what they pay for when we're already sick, right? Yep. But one other thing I wanted to mention, because I think this is really important for new people getting into this career, is that labs, all blood labs, I don't know about Canada, but in the US, we discard the top 2.5% and we discard the bottom 2.5%. So we're really dealing with the 95 average. And every lab reassesses their numbers about quarterly. So if you're seeing a lot of hypothyroid, they're going to move that range to make that a little bit normal. I actually tested this out with my son in the same building, in the same city, but just 2 different labs. And I went through the lab ranges when I had time, and some of them were the same, and some of them were off by a little bit, and some were a little bit wider. So it is, functional ranges don't change, right? They don't change. Cholesterol has always been 185 to 200. And recently, a few years ago, there was, I'm sure, a lot of dinners and perhaps some trips involved, and they moved it down to 99 to 169. So, everybody can be on a statin, right? Mm-hmm. So Pfizer a little bit more money. So we really have to be conscious of what works for us and, the moving numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, I mean, so my role, Erin and I work for a health coaching school as well. We're both practicing health coaches, and we work for a health coaching school. My role is talking to people that are interested about this. And I feel like a broken record, Erin. I say on almost every episode, the sheer number of clinical practitioners I'm speaking to that are moving this direction because they are so disenchanted with the conventional medical system, predominantly nurses, mostly nurses. But I'm hearing more and more doctors that are like, forget it. I want to get out of that model. I want to move to more of an independent concierge practice, and I want to be able to do more stuff across state lines. So that there are certain things that are going to be limited in that respect. So that's more along the lifestyle medicine, like coaching realm. So, I mean, this little group of 3 of us, there's people from that allopathic world that recognize something's wrong.
Oh, completely. I was just interviewed on a podcast a couple of months ago by a cardiologist. And I said, who's your audience? And he said, it's pretty much all physicians. You need to tell them what to order. I said, do you want me to tell them? He said, yes, you need to tell them the markers. And I work with doctors as patients because they don't know. And I when I go through the labs with them, I say, do you want me to go through it with you like I do everybody else? Or do you want to look at it and ask questions? And I've never had one physician or surgeon that I've worked with that says, I'll read it. And they don't know. And I'll ask them, what do you know about this lab and what don't you know? And they don't really know. It's not their fault. It's the educational system that we don't prepare our physicians to be looking wide and deep. We just don't. Right. So it's more of a chemistry experiment. You've got this ale and we've got this chemical. to quell that symptom.
A numbers game, right? So whether it's the insurance model that we have here in the US, or it's the Canadian model that's like, we've got to basically take care of every single Canadian. So it's a numbers game. We've got to see as many people as we can, in a day or what have you. And so it doesn't give you the opportunity to go wide and deep. And we're seeing this same thing play out in the food spectrum.
Yeah.
And the problems with how poor our food system is because it's a numbers game. And we think we have to feed this versus if we had just taken the time to actually invest in small local farms to feed that small local community and people can eat real food. Because guess what? You don't need to, it would take 8 bags of Doritos for anyone to actually feel satiated for like an hour or two versus you eat, a steak or some fish and some vegetables. Smaller portions, more nutritious, you're satiated, and oh, by the way, you're hungrier. Right. But instead, we've adopted this mass scale approach to food and medicine, and we're all just fatter and sicker.
Exactly. You put it
so frustrating. Yeah. So tell me a little bit. So, because I think what you do, you came up during a time when the path to where you are is different than health coaches that are starting now. And in many cases, unless they want to go and get a 4-year degree and get licensed in something, some of what you do, they can't do clinically, at least not yet, not until they've gained more experience. Perhaps you even said you rely on mentors a lot of times and doctors and so on. But, we have repeatedly said in our school, pick a niche, pick something that you want to focus on, learn that really, really deep and build really something amazing.
Yeah.
And we are big believers at our school, and I think a lot of health coaches, that at the end of the day, for most of our clients, food's the biggest needle mover by far, because it impacts kind of everything else. And so you've written a book, I've read it down, Food Frame, right? Yeah. Tell us a little bit that impetus behind, what's the philosophy behind that? What's the goal of Food Frame? Why a book? Or is it a course? Tell us a little bit about that approach.
Yeah. So I, as I was mentioning earlier, when I first started out, I thought, okay, everybody should be eating this way, right? It was pretty much how I was kind of eating probably. And I went through my vegan stage and I went through all this and, I watched my blood work, my blood sugars go up because all I was eating was beans and carbs and, so I reversed that. And I did sort of a one size fits all. I mean, maybe a little bit of exceptions, but for the most part, it was a one size fits all. And as I realized, and all these books that would come out, right, there would be, all these different books that these amazing doctors or somebody would write. And there was a philosophy behind it. And you would hear, oh gosh, 45 people did amazing on this, but, 25 people didn't, right? Or we all have that story where our neighbor lost, 50 pounds on keto and we tried it and nothing happened, right? I mean, me personally, I couldn't even get into the state of ketosis. I needed exogenous ketones to get into that state. So it's not for everybody. And so what I realized after doing everything, after trying everything, after doing every detox and cleanse on the market, I realized everybody's different, right? We have our different genetic makeup. And genetics load the gun, the environment and our lifestyle pull the trigger. And so I realized we should be more specialized. We should be eating according to our health status. So what I found was I was using the same typical 5 or 6 lifestyles, eating lifestyles or diet types for each person, depending on what they came in with, right? So let's say, for example, if you have SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, you've got chronic bloating, and it's matched with either chronic diarrhea or chronic constipation, or maybe an alternating. Or you have IBS or IBD, which is very loosely diagnosed a lot. I'm going to put you on a low FODMAP eating lifestyle, right? And that's elimination. That's 30 to 90 days. And then, let's say you have blood sugar dysregulation. I'm going to recommend keto, or if you're qualified for it, or paleo, which most people do well with. If you have autoimmune, I'm going to recommend autoimmune protocol. And then maybe after that, we're going to go low lectin or go paleo. And then I have vegetarian or vegan, because some people are really just, they have grown up their whole lives due to religious or cultural as vegetarians. So I talk a lot about that and I break down that. So those are the 6 different diet types that I highlight in the book, because those are the 6 different diet types I work with predominantly in my office. Very rarely I go off of that, but occasionally I do. And I always start with my detox because we're so toxic. We have 86,000 chemicals. This is a new number. I'm so sad to report that the FDA just approved for us to use, well over 3,000 of which we can eat. And so we're bombarded with toxins. So it's really important to detoxify. So once we do the detox, we're getting your blood test, your stool test. Then there's the 6 different diet types that I recommend. And I talk about blood test and stool test, and I talk about everything in that book. And then I have some recipes for each different diet type. But I see so much success in my office. I mean, it's so amazing what happens in here that I feel that everybody deserves this. I wish I knew this 20 years ago. And I think that the world should know this. So that's why I wrote the book, is that I think that everybody has the right to have this information and pick a diet type, find your food frame. The quiz is on my website, or if you already know your diagnosis, if you're already diabetic, you can kind of go from there. And we should all be able to have that information at our fingertips, because it took me years, decades to attain that information. So I just felt that it was my duty to share it with a greater audience than who I work with in my office.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Yeah, I get that. So everyone starts with the detox because we're all toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Our environment.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give a little quick hit list of what those toxins are, where they're coming from?
Sure. So they're pesticides. That's a big one in our food, but there's additives and preservatives. There's herbicides. There's sunscreen and all the makeup we use. The shampoo is filled with sometimes gluten. It's the glyphosate that's in the soil, that's in the vegetables that we're having at any conventional restaurant, or any, all the bad oils that we're having that are rancid, that are highly inflammatory. These, there's so many toxins there. It's the paint that we're breathing in, and the fire retardant on our clothes or our sheets or our furniture. It's the candles that we're burning every day. It's the perfume, the moisturizers, it's the average American female comes in contact with over 200 toxins just before she's left the bathroom each morning. You think the nail polish that's constantly being embedded in our nails, the gel, right? We got gel and all these other things that we put on our nails and our hair dye. We could go on and on and on and on, right? So, and let alone, breast implants, which has, 40 heavy metals and toxins that we're just absorbing day in and day out, right? So we're highly toxic. We're highly toxic. So we have to clean out clean the garage out, right? We can't park the car in if we have too much toxins, right? So the liver, it's a lot of work on the liver. You have to alleviate that pressure, and toxins live in fat cells. That's why we lose weight typically when we do my detox, but it isn't about weight loss. It is not a weight loss program. Weight loss is a side effect of wellness, and we focus on wellness. So you're eating good food, but you're trying to eat as clean as possible. Here in the US, we have grain-fed cattle for the most part. Any restaurant you're typically going to, unless it's a health food restaurant or you're paying a premium for, it's grain-fed. And they found a loophole that you can have call it grass-fed, but you can also give it grain for the last 30 days before slaughter, and it's still considered grass-fed. So now we have to look for grass-fed and grass-finished. The goalpost keeps moving because there's just more toxins and more toxins. And so we are it's in our reign. Glyphosate is in our reign. So it's really, we have to be very diligent about removing those toxins.
So you mentioned that you see tremendous success in clinic with your clients. And you mentioned earlier that you work one-on-one with clients. You have the book, you have the course as well, which is great to have those other outlets. But just in terms of your one-on-one clients, these are big changes, like detoxifying one's life, then taking on one of these food frames, one of these, like an AIP is a very strict elimination diet, and that takes a lot of support, and people struggle with it. I briefly dabbled in autoimmunity in the earliest part of my health coaching career, and then I realized that people found it too hard to stick to that program, even though they're managing these autoimmune diseases. And it's like, isn't that hard as well? But anyway,
yeah. My
question I'm setting up here is, what interval do you meet with your clients to help keep them on track? Is it weekly? How do you do that? Are they in office visits? Are you virtual over the phone? How do you manage the logistics of client visits?
So the way I structure my practice is I have a new patient. I call it an initial nutritional consultation, and that's an hour. So that could be through Zoom. It could be through phone, which I don't typically do, but typically Zoom or in person. And I work with people all over the world, really, but mostly in the United States. I do work with some people from Canada. And we have an initial nutritional consultation where we do all the intake. I ask a lot of questions. I get a really good feel for what's going on, what their symptoms are, and everything I need to know, where we're going, what the goal is, and so on and so forth. And then that's when I order blood test and stool test after that appointment. And I put them on my detox typically. Unless they're very, very, very sick, I don't do the detox, but 99% of the time I do. And that detox is you're eating real food, you're having 2 collagen shakes a day, you're starting to feel amazing, but it's really very important because I kind of give them structure without saying you can't eat this and you can't eat that. I give them all the foods that they can eat, and we're taking out gluten, we're taking out dairy, we're taking out alcohol, we're taking out sugar, processed foods. And just that alone, I very often see a lot of symptoms reverse just with that alone, right? And then after that appointment, I meet with them the next week. I usually, at that appointment, I recommend I have packages that are discounted, a little bit discounted. And I do that because I want to set somebody up for success. So if you come into me, you do the detox and you're like, oh, I feel good. The other stuff I can deal with, but my headaches went away. I'm good. Then they're not really gleaning anything from me. I'm frustrated because I haven't hit the finish line. They haven't hit the finish line. And so I typically will present them packages. I have a 12-week package, which most people do. I have a 8-week package and a 4-week package. And I work with some people for years. I see them every 2 weeks or once a month. And then some people come in for 12 weeks. They're good and they're off they go. I usually hear back from them at some point down the future or from one of their family members. And then, so on that 12-week program, they're committed. I've got 12 weeks that I'm committed to. And so they know that in 12 weeks, we're going to reorder all those labs. So you can see we're sitting there high-fiving at that appointment. Oh, that fatty liver's gone and those blood sugars are regulated. And, unless they're really bad, but we'll see definitely progress. If they comply, even mostly comply, then we always see the needle move, which is super fun. It's my favorite appointment. And then I'll see them the next week to see how they're doing on the detox, how they're feeling, what their symptoms, making sure they're on track, what they're making their shakes right, they're eating enough food. And then the following week, I typically have their blood work. So that's an hour-long appointment. And at that one, that's when the light bulb goes off and they say, oh, wow, I didn't realize, and wow, and this, and you're right, my dad has this. And, that's where a lot of the awakening comes. And they're motivated at that point. And I talk a lot about prevention, and this is the allopathic, this is the lab range, and this is the functional range. So we're talking about prevention and things like that, or we're already talking about disease, or I'm referring them to a doctor to write a script. I work with a few doctors, so we work together. And then after that, we'll get the stool test, and I'll go through the stool test on the next appointment, which is usually a half hour. And I'm recommending a supplementation protocol. And once we get off the detox, we've got their blood work, now I have a roadmap. I know exactly what's going on. We have blood sugar dysregulation, or we have hypothyroid, or we have, I'm testing them for Epstein-Barr virus or cytomegalovirus because they have a major viral pattern, whatever it is. I've got that next step. And then if they show up for gluten sensitivity, then I'm ordering more gluten labs through Cyrex Labs. I do the Array 3 and 3X and 4. And I really do a deep dive on gluten, talk about gluten and cross-reactivity. And then after that, it's pretty much weekly, unless they want to go every other week, but everybody is different. So some people want to come in here once a week until they're done. And some people are like, oh, I feel way better. 90% of my symptoms are gone. I'm not in any pain. I'm good. Let's go every other week. Totally good with that. So everybody needs a little different level of accountability as well. Some people, I give them food logs and I say, you need to fill this out every single week. I want to go through it, right? And if you have a blood pressure issue, I'm going to have you take blood pressure and bring in your log to me. And so everybody is different, and you really have to have that sensibility on who needs more accountability and who doesn't. How much rope can you give? And some people really want to come in to just sort of confess or just to talk. And then other people come in, they want to get it done. So you have to sort of assess your customer, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the client focused, client led coaching relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in your book, you said you do talk about testing. Do you provide resources? Do you let that people that read their book, they have the ability to go to that lab themselves and order what they want and that sort of thing? Because here's where, because talking about like motivation and compliance, sometimes you're right. When people see data and information, that's what motivates some of my last client was based on his A1C reading from his doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was a wake up call for him and motivated him to want to seek help. Right. For other people, it's other sort of biofeedback, but also, you know what? He's checking. I mean, clients that actually pay real money out of pocket for care are going to be much more inclined to remain quote unquote compliant and do what they need to do because they're paying for it.
Right.
And I do think the sort of, whether it's universal healthcare or insurance as a third payer, removes that sense of financial investment to the client. And I've just noticed a tremendous difference between people that have a hard time doing what the doctor tells them versus taking a walk with me if they happen to be in person, or making sure, and don't get me wrong, there are clients that just don't show, but it's rare. When I'm charging enough, that's very rare. I see that happen. I don't know about your experience, Erin, but I see that happen more often when I wasn't charging enough in the early days.
Yeah. I definitely agree that if you're making a financial commitment, an investment, you're showing up.
Yeah. But then also that sort of being able to see some sort of data so that you can see the results, not just the biofeedback of how you feel, but I've been feeling really good and being able, because the scale is only so useful.
Right. Exactly.
People, especially women, right? And kind of being able to, so I'm glad to hear, and we're seeing this more and more, resources out there where health consumers can actually pay for their own labs. They just need to know which ones. And then at the end of the day, what are you going to do with the information? And that's where working with someone who knows what that means is really helpful.
Well, that's perfect for my course, Achieving Optimal Thyroid Health, is I break down the whole thyroid and I talk about people with hyper and hypo and Hashimoto's and Graves and nodules and thyroidectomy and what to eat and what not to eat and how to read a lab. How do I read my lab? What are my markers? What am I looking for? What am I asking my doctor for? Yeah. And in my book, I do have a whole appendix of every single lab that I work with, that I recommend, that you can get these tests done. So it's very difficult. It's not user friendly, right? We should all be able to order our own labs and have some sort of interpretation. Even just reading the lab when you get it back. I mean, if I was a little bit younger, I would completely take this on because it's so antiquated and it's so unorganized. It should be readable to the consumer. These are my kidney markers. This means I'm dehydrated if it's low. This means I'm not if it's high, or they should have some sort of an interpretation guide. Yeah. But it's.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing this trend. I mean, Dr. William Davis is sort of undoctored, and his undoctored circle, I think he changed the name though. He's like, these are the labs you need.
Right.
This is what they mean. Here's where you go order it. You don't have to pay me. Here's how you go order it. Now join this group because there's these people that have the same symptoms of you. And we've got some health coaches in this group that are helping people adopt the behaviors and make different choices and build new habits. Right. That help move you in the direction you need to go. And this is where health coaches come in. I keep trying to pound the table that, the typical health coach getting credentialed today, we're not in the business of treating illness. We're here to promote wellness. That's what health coaches do, right? Mm-hmm. This is where prevention comes in. And even if it's somebody who has been diagnosed, it's okay. So what habits and what behaviors and what choices can we identify as things that lead you down that illness spiral? Mm-hmm. And how can we turn those on its head? And what steps do we need to take to actually change direction? Because at the end of the day, it's the how, it's the accountability, it's the support, it's a sense of empowerment that so many patients in the allopathic system have just been decimated.
Yeah. And I think that with health coaches, if you just steer people away from processed foods and inform them about how inflammatory processed foods are, and talk about inflammation and talk about gut health and what foods are going to feed good gut health and what are going to destroy it, that alone is worth its weight. I mean, that's a huge light bulb that goes off for people who don't realize it, that drinking a bottle of wine a night is not okay. That's not okay. What's that going to do to my microbiome? What's it going to do to my liver? What's it going to do to my blood sugars, my sleep, my cortisol, my endocrine system? So it's you don't have to order labs to make an impact, because we're so backwards and so uneducated and so marketed that there's a lot of unwinding to do. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yes. And thank you for saying that, because my one concern with this conversation and people listening that feels way outside my comfort zone. And if I can't order labs for people, I can't move the needle. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
I never order labs. I don't. That's not, I'm not even interested. Right. But my clients still find success. My package is 12 weeks as well. I think, and more than half of them actually buy another 12-week package, honestly. Because they're so excited about the journey that they're on and the success they've had so far that they want to keep going. And they kind of feel like they still need training wheels, right? So it's 12 weeks, but the frequency changes, or what we're talking about changes, and things of that nature. But I guess my takeaway from this conversation is I'm excited that there's people like you out there that are able to do the stuff that health coaches that don't want to do that, like me, can refer people to.
There's room to roam.
Yeah.
And, I always say that Michael Phelps, one of the greatest swimmers of our time, he knows how to swim. But if somebody's not on that deck waiting for him at 5 a.m. every morning when he was training, there would probably be a few mornings that he'd hit that snooze button and say, not today. I don't feel like it today. Right? Because we're all human. And so we need that coach, that accountability, that cheerleader, that support person, that educator. And people want to talk to you about what they're eating and what they're struggling with. And we have a really complicated relationship with food, right? I was telling you about my childhood. I'm like, why are these foods bad? They taste pretty good to me. And so, we have this, we're punished with it. We're celebrated with it. We're rewarded with it. We don't do this with our toothbrush and our toothpaste, right? We have to brush our teeth, but we don't drive home going, hope there's a lot of toothpaste in the toothpaste, right? But we're thinking, oh my God, I hope nobody ate those extra brownies that were left over from last night's party, right? Because we have this very complicated relationship with food. So we do need help unwinding that. And everybody has they grow up with different values around food, right? So it's, we as adults, I think we need to really unwind that, and we need to educate ourselves, because most people don't realize that we have 86,000 chemicals approved in our country and that we get approved about 2,000 a year. Most people don't realize that they have a blood sugar issue, and that whole banana and all the blueberries that they're putting in their shake every morning, followed by pineapple for dessert, is giving them way too much sugar in a day. Well, it's fruit. It's good for me, isn't it? And that low-fat cheese is so much better than the regular cheese. I mean, there's so many misconceptions because we're so marketed that we need somebody to help unwind this for us and educate us.
Yeah, people are bewildered about food, about their bodies. And that is absolutely important and safe and in scope place for health coaches to play. And to your point, it's rampant. There's no shortage of people that need our help.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Awesome. So tell people where they can find you if they want to kind of check out your book or the course that you offer. I could see some health coaches wanting to take that course.
I will, because every client I take on has Hashimoto's. I'll pass you off to a thyroid expert.
Yeah, it's really increasing, which is really sad, but and it's so underdiagnosed too, which is also just so sad. But my course, Achieving Optimal Thyroid Health, is on my website at Risa Groux Nutrition. That's RISA GROUX nutrition.com. And also you'll find my detox there, which we are giving your listeners 10% off. And you'll find recipes, different diet types. You can take the food frame quiz there. And my book, Food Frame, is in there as well. And you can also get the book on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Target.com. So it's in all of those places. And on social media, it's all Risa Groux Nutrition. And I try to give tips and get education all the time because I think it's just, there's so much out there. There's so much to learn. And there's so much that I know through my journey and working with people that I'd like to share with people because I think everybody needs to know.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Can't wait to check it out.
Yeah.
Awesome. This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.